Willow Lane wasn't just a road, it was history. Evan Green's father used to call it the town's front porch. Families walked dogs here, children raced bikes, and church vans parked under the elm trees for Sunday gatherings. Delivery trucks rumbled through, and farmers hauling hay bales waved to neighbors as they passed. For Evan, who lived at the very end of the lane in a weathered farmhouse, this cracked ribbon of asphalt was the sound of life itself. Laughter, footsteps, engines, greetings. It was ordinary, but it was theirs. So when a white envelope stamped with a bold blue crest arrived one morning, Evan almost tossed it with the junk mail, until he read the words inside. Effective immediately, Willow Point homeowners. Association assumes ownership and maintenance authority over Willow Lane. The letter went on about beautification, security, and community fees. But the last line chilled him. Unauthorized use of Willow Lane will be considered trespassing. Trespassing. On the very road where his son had learned to ride a bike. Evan called the number listed, his voice tight. "This is a public road. You can't just take it," a woman answered with rehearsed politeness. "Sir, our board followed all proper filings. Willow Lane is now part of Willow Point HOA jurisdiction. If you disagree, you may submit a formal appeal." She paused, then added almost smugly, "There's a $75 filing fee." Click. Evan stood in his kitchen, staring at the silent receiver. His hands shook, not from fear, from anger. Someone had just told him his whole life was no longer his. 2 days later, Evan loaded hay into his pickup and drove toward town. But halfway down Willow Lane, his headlights bounced off something new, a barricade. Orange plastic fencing stretched across half the road. A shiny metal sign glared, "Private Road, HOA access only." A man in a polo shirt leaned against a golf cart, arms folded. "Morning, sir. Willow Lane is restricted access now. You'll need an HOA decal." Evan's jaw tightened. "I've driven this road my whole life." "Then you'll have to file for membership." Evan's voice cracked like a whip. "This is theft!" But the guard only shrugged, unmoved. Behind Evan, a line of cars honked. Mrs. Carter, 80 years old and frail, sat stranded in her van, gripping the wheel with trembling hands. Kids from the next farm over stood with backpacks, confused why their bus wasn't coming down the lane. For the first time, Willow Lane felt like a cage. At the diner that night, the whole town buzzed. Farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, all asking the same question. Can they really do this? Old Mr. Harlan, the retired postman, shook his head. "I delivered mail down that lane for 40 years. County paved it back in '62. That's a public road. Always has been, but others weren't so sure. HOAs have money," someone muttered. "Money buys lawyers." Evan sat in silence, coffee untouched. He could handle his own frustration, but the sight of Mrs. Carter stranded, the kids confused, that cut deep. This wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who relied on that strip of asphalt. The next morning, Evan drove to the county clerk's office. Rows of dusty binders and faded maps lined the shelves. He found the original plat map of Willow Lane, clear as day, marked Public Right-of-Way. The county had patched, plowed, and paved it for decades. But then he saw something stranger. A new deed, filed only months earlier, now labeling the lane as community property. The signatures looked rushed. One name was supposedly from the county surveyor, except Evan knew that man had retired last year. Evan's stomach sank. Fraud. It had to be. He stormed into the HOA office, a gleaming townhouse with tinted windows and expensive landscaping. Behind the desk sat Ms. Lockwell, the HOA president. Her red blazer was sharp, her smile sharper. "This is my road," Evan said firmly. "It's always been public. You can't just slap your logo on it." She tapped a folder. "The paperwork says otherwise. We've assumed responsibility. We'll add lights, cameras, patrols. Property values will soar." Evan leaned closer. "This isn't about values. It's about power. And you don't own Willow Lane." Her eyes narrowed. "If you feel that strongly, Mr. Green, file a complaint. We welcome due process. But until then, stay off our property." Evan left with his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Instead of exploding, Evan turned to action. He guided delivery trucks down the old county back road, a muddy detour through the fields. He drove Mrs. Carter to church himself. He told the school bus driver to pick the kids up at his farmhouse. Each small act was a middle finger to the HOA. And every night, he wrote it all down. Photos of the barricade, names of guards, dates and times. The HOA thought they were untouchable. Evan was determined to prove them wrong. That night, Evan called Mr. Daniels, a retired surveyor. Daniels let out a bitter laugh when Evan described the deed. That's impossible. You can't privatize a right-of-way without signed easements from every adjoining landowner. And even then, the county has to approve. If those signatures are missing, the claim's dead. Evan explained what he found at the clerk's office. Daniel's tone hardened. Then you've caught them red-handed. That road still belongs to the public. Evan hung up, pulse racing. He finally had a thread, a way to pull the whole scheme apart. But one man couldn't fight an HOA. He called Sarah Myers, a young councilwoman who had a reputation for standing up to shady developers. She listened intently, then said, "Evan, this isn't just your fight. If we let them get away with this, every road in town is at risk." She introduced him to a legal aid attorney and a local reporter. Suddenly, Evan wasn't a lone farmer shouting at a fence. He was the leader of something bigger, a movement. They gathered in Evan's barn, rain drumming on the tin roof. Papers, maps, and photos were spread across hay bales like war plans. The lawyer pointed to the fraudulent deed. "This is weak. One missing signature and their whole case collapses," the reporter leaned forward. "The people will eat this up. HOA bullies stealing a country road? That's front-page news." Sarah raised her voice over the storm. "No vandalism. No screaming matches. We do this clean. We expose them with facts. If the HOA cheated, we bury them with their own paperwork." Evan looked around at the determined faces. For the first time, the weight on his shoulders lifted. He wasn't fighting alone. The battle for Willow Lane had just begun. The HOA doubled down. New barricades appeared, now with heavy chains. No trespassing signs were nailed to trees. One guard even threatened to tow Mrs. Carter's van when she tried to visit her daughter. Evan stood at the edge of the barricade one evening, watching headlights stack up behind it like prisoners in a line. Neighbors muttered angrily, but no one dared cut the chains. Fear had taken root. That night, Evan promised himself, if they think this road is theirs, then they'll soon know what it feels like to lose something vital. One Saturday morning, HOA members gathered for a board celebration. Shiny SUVs and polished sedans rolled down Willow Lane like a victory parade. They parked right in the middle of the road, music blaring as if daring anyone to stop them. Evan watched from his porch. The sight made his chest ache. These weren't caretakers of the neighborhood. They were conquerors, flaunting their control. But as he studied the long row of parked cars, luxury badges, spotless paint, custom plates, an idea sparked in his mind. An idea both simple and devastating. Evan spent weeks quietly working in his barn. Not tractors, not hay, but something far more cunning. He pulled out old blueprints from his father's days as a mechanic. He studied diagrams of hydraulic lifts, towing rigs, even farm irrigation pumps that could be repurposed. Every night, lantern light spilled from the barn as he welded, bolted, and tested. The neighbors thought he was simply fixing farm tools. But Evan was building something new, a way to make cars disappear without leaving a scratch. Meanwhile, the HOA grew bolder. They fined residents for improper parking in their own driveways. They threatened to cut off road access for those who didn't pay fees. Children whispered at school about the road police. One afternoon, Evan's own son came home in tears. "Dad, the guard told me I can't ride my bike past the sign anymore." Evan's heart clenched. That was the moment his quiet patience burned away. He knew what had to come next. On a misty night, Evan rolled one of his old pickup trucks into the barn. He hooked it to the strange contraption he'd built, a hybrid of a farm winch, irrigation pulleys, and reinforced steel ramps. The machine hummed, and within minutes the pickup was lifted, slid backward, and hidden under tarps. Silent, effortless. Evan stood back, wiping sweat from his brow. It worked. He didn't need to smash, slash, or vandalize. He could simply make things vanish. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The HOA scheduled a late-night board inspection meeting. Their cars, the same shiny SUVs, luxury sedans, and polished convertibles, lined Willow Lane like trophies. At midnight, while the board argued inside their clubhouse, Evan struck. His machine purred like a cat as one by one. Vehicles were lifted, shifted, and wheeled into hidden barns, sheds, and silos across his farmland. By 3 a.m., Willow Lane stood empty. Not a single HOA car in sight. Morning came like thunder. HOA members stormed outside, coffee cups still in hand, only to find nothing. Their cars were gone. Every last one. Phones buzzed. Voices cracked. Someone screamed, "We've been robbed!" Another shouted for police. But when officers arrived, they found no broken glass, no skid marks, no sign of forced entry. Just an eerily empty street. The officers shrugged. Maybe you all parked wrong? Maybe they got towed? The HOA president's face turned red with fury. All of them? Every car? At the same time? The police simply shook their heads. Without evidence, there's nothing we can do. Word spread like wildfire. The town buzzed with laughter behind closed doors. Did you hear? HOA lost every one of their cars. Poof, gone like magic. Guess they know what it feels like to have something stolen. For the first time in weeks, neighbors smiled when they passed Evan. Some winked. Some whispered thank you. No one said a word out loud, but everyone knew who had struck the blow. Without their cars, HOA board members scrambled like ants. Meetings were canceled. Patrols stopped. Fines were left unpaid. Their once unshakable authority crumbled under the weight of their own panic. And when Sarah, the councilwoman, quietly released proof of their fraudulent road deed to the press, the board's credibility collapsed completely. The county revoked their claim. Willow Lane was reinstated as a public road. The barricades were removed. Weeks later, Evan walked down Willow Lane at sunset. Children rode their bikes again. Mrs. Carter drove her van freely. Neighbors waved without fear. The road was alive once more. At the far end, the empty HOA clubhouse sat dark, abandoned. Their shiny cars never returned. Evan had long since dismantled his machine, scattering its parts across the farm. As the sky turned gold, Evan smiled. Justice hadn't come from shouting or lawsuits. It had come from turning the HOA's arrogance against them. They had taken his road, so he had taken their pride. And Willow Lane, his lane, their lane, was finally free.